Usually, normally. Okay, perfect. Okay, I think we're good, right? The broadcast is live. Hey, Sandra, how are you?
I'm super good and welcome everyone that is going to be joining us today on our English version of the webinar. Thank you for so much for being here and yeah,
There we
joining us.
go.
There
Perfect.
you
So
go.
we have a cool webinar today. It's called Uniting Volunteers in the Defense of Humanity. So we're gonna bring up the presentations.
Very
Um,
interesting speaker.
yeah, super interesting. Um, some really exciting news on the topic. So that's the title of the webinar. Just to get started, as always, thank you for being here. We will be talking about what are human rights. Human right 29, which is responsibility. Human right 30, no one can take away your human rights. We have a special guest. We'll be talking about solutions to protect our human rights. Of course, as always, Sandra Moreno. She is the director of United for Human Rights, Tampa. Sandra has an excellent production record on the topic of human rights, leading education on the topic of human rights to over 10,000 people. Sandra has been in Chile, Mexico, obviously, United States. And through webinars, of course, we've reached Europe and a lot of countries in South America, like Argentina. And I believe we have some people from Africa not long ago as well. So that's the beauty of technology. And when you put technology and passion together, you can reach a lot of people. So speaking of passion, we share the passion of educating people in human rights and making human rights a reality. That's the picture of the first time we met, which is probably what, a year and a half ago, probably about
A little bit more, I think, because
more
it was definitely prior to COVID.
prior. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Oh, wow.
I know with the times, every like time just goes by.
Yeah, that's very true. Wow. So it's been longer than that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, and
We look
as
different
always,
also. Well, I look different.
we all look different. Yes. I think I look younger. uh, good
um,
times.
yeah, thank you so much, Wency, for joining me on this live webinar that we have been doing for almost 2 years now. Wency has, in the last past 10 years, trained over 5,000 entrepreneurs. He's dedicated to the area of administration. So he's bringing all that expertise and all that experience that he has on that to our webinar and to educating on human rights. So thank you, Wency, for joining us.
Absolutely. So, and as always in these webinars, we have the rule to ask, comment, and share. What do we mean by this, Sandra?
Yeah, so we want everybody to basically, if you have a question for the speaker, right, or if you have something to comment on what we're saying, or if you want to ask something, we totally encourage you to do so, so that we can um, answer you live. That's the idea. So and also share it with other people so that more people can see this webinar, meet this guest that we have today, and know a little bit about human rights. So
Perfect. And also, when it comes to social media platforms, the more you interact with any post, the more power the social media will give you. So when you ask questions, make comments, or share the post, then social media will share the post with more people. All right, so we're ready to go. We're getting started. Should we go? Yes.
we should get started. Yes,
All right.
not get started. We should start.
We shall continue. Yes, absolutely. So the first thing, as always, is what are human rights? Let's go over the definitions real quick. So the definition of human is a member of the Homo sapiens species, a man, woman, or child, basically a person. And the definition of rights are things to which you are entitled or allowed, freedoms that are guaranteed. So when we put it together, what are human rights? Well, those are the rights you have simply because you are a human. Human rights are based on the principle of respect for the individual, and I think that's a big word when it comes to human rights, respect, and we define that here as due respect means due regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others. I think that's super big when it comes to human rights, right, Sandra? What do you
Exactly,
think?
exactly. Because as we know, like we are all different. As part of human species, it's like one of the qualities that we have. We look different, right, from each other. We think different. We make different decisions. We want different things. And everybody is different in that way, right? So that's why it's so important that we relate human rights with the respect of each other, because it's okay to have those differences, because we're not expecting each of us to be the same, but we just need to tolerate those differences on others, like just be respectful for those differences. And like don't go and attack other people because they look different, they think different, and that's the base of human beings. So why should we even think about doing it, right? Because
That's
it just
right.
doesn't make sense. We need to respect each other, and in that way we can live with each other better. And that's what
Perfect.
human rights is all about.
That's right. Good. So, um, there's another word which is dignity, which is the
Mhm.
state or quality of being worthy of honor or respect. So the reason I define that is because it says here their fundamental assumption, basically human rights, their fundamental assumption is that each person is a moral and rational being who deserves to be treated with dignity. In other
Right.
words, worthy of honor or respect. So they're called human rights because they are universal, whereas nations or specialized groups enjoy specific rights that apply only to them. Human rights are the rights to which everyone is entitled, no matter who they are or where they live, simply because they are alive. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
That's like super important, because some people don't know that. Like
yeah.
it's not about where you live and what country you live at, right? It's about you're a human being, so these rights belong to you.
Yes, and the more we do these webinars, the more we realize how the necessity of the education. We've seen how, especially people moving from another country, from
Mm.
one country to another, then you get to see, uh, especially non-profit organizations get to see how much uh, basically human rights violations are tolerated just because of the lack of education on the
Yeah,
topic.
yeah,
So there's a
totally.
special relationship between these three state of existence, right? So in which this they're called the state of its existence
I
are
think
being
that what you
carried out.
mentioned, like state of existence, is perfect, because like that's how we live normally. Like those things are the things that we can identify in our livingness, right? So
That's
you
right.
like somebody has different roles in their life. So those are all the states that he wants to be. So he's a mother, he's a teacher, he's a professional, like a lawyer, a doctor, etc. So all of those things are things that he would want to he is, right? Not he, I mean, he could be that he wants to be, but also that he is already in his life or in the past or now in the present. And then he wants to do different things. He wants to travel, he wants to have vacations, he wants to play sport. Those are all the things that a human being would want to do. Obviously, you guys can manage other things. And there's also things that he would like to have. So he would like to have, obviously, everybody nowadays has a cell phone, right? They have a home, they have a car, they have, if they can afford that. And, all the things that you would have, right? And human rights are all those rights that allow you to do all those things. So it allows you to be all those things, to do all those things, and to have all those things. So that's why we related to that, because every time we're making a decision on what we want to be, do, or have in our life, human rights is there to protect them, those decisions, or allow us to have those decisions. So it's important that human rights not something that is outside of us. It's kind of we want it to relate it to this because it's as part of our livingness. It's as part of how we live, right?
Yeah. So every activity of our lives, um, You're either able to do it because the human rights are present, or you're not able to do it because there is a violation of human rights.
Yep, that's it.
Good. So to get started, we will show you two short videos that related to the. We're focusing on these two human rights tonight. The first one is
Yeah.
responsibility, and here we go.
Good morning. I'm here to read you your rights.
My what?
We are all free and equal. Don't discriminate. You have the right to life.
You have the right to life and to live in freedom and safety.
You have a right to education. You have a right to your own things.
You have the right to social security. You have the right to play.
You have the right to democracy. You have the right to asylum.
You have the right to take responsibility.
And no one and nobody can take these rights and freedoms away from you.
Why are you doing this?
You have a right to know.
All right. And number 30 is no one can take away your human rights.
We're all born free and equal.
These are your human rights. There are 30 of them. They belong to you. You don't have to buy them, or apply for them, or ask permission to have them. They're just yours. No matter who you are, where you're from, how old you are, or anything else. It's just that simple. Now, some people may try to ignore your rights, or violate them, or pretend they don't exist. But they can't change the fact that they're yours. Human right number 30. No one can take away your human rights. What are human rights? Find out at youthforhumanrights.org.
All right. So what are we showing this to, Sandra? What do we have for tonight?
So yeah, we have a special guest that he's definitely helping us on he's helping on taking the responsibility, right, of protecting the rights of others. And also he's making sure that everybody knows that they have those human rights, because sometimes one of the first things that happen is that people think that they don't have rights because they're in a different place, or somebody can take their rights away, right? So he's helping, definitely doing that, like, hey, you have them no matter where you and no one can take away your human rights, right? So this is a special guest. His name is Stephen Ferry. He's the co-founder of Defending Humanity. So Stephen Ferry is actually a professor, a minister, an entrepreneur who spent 15 years working for nonprofits. He is a writer with over 20 books and hundreds of articles published. He has been teaching moral codes and human rights as a sideline to students around the world for the past 17 years. And just a year ago, decided to focus on human rights, founding Defending Humanity, and just recently also the Global Human Rights Alliance. So we want to give a warm welcome to Stephen to our stage.
Thank you very much, Sandra, Wency.
Hello, Stephen. How are you?
I'm very fine.
Hi,
Thank you.
Stephen.
Thanks for having us on.
Yes, thank you for being here. And wow, the 17 years, that's amazing. That's like a record. Well, we have had other people with all those works, but it's just amazing to validate that
Pretty impressive.
everyone
Yeah,
that's doing that. Yeah, for sure. I would think that I'm just getting started. So that's definitely, I got a long way to go to get to you.
I don't think so. You're already in there pitching.
Well, it's an honor to have you here with us today. We know that you do, as we mentioned, a lot of activities around humanity help, moral codes, as you mentioned, and human rights. tell us how you started to become, we call it like a community advocate, right? Because you're helping all around you, right? Or I don't know if you have a better term for that, but tell us how you started.
No, that's good. I think the way I started was probably a very small way and a rather unusual way. It's about 45 years ago. I knew that good health was very important for people, and it was obviously assisted by taking nutritional supplements. And the problem with that was the cost at that time of any supplements was too high. And in the community in which I lived, people couldn't afford them. So I organized for those who wanted to have supplements, about 40 people, to contribute a small amount each month, like it was about 50 pennies, or about $1, let's say, a month. And I combined all that money, and we bought 10 basic supplements that we all needed. And every month I would sit down at my desk and separate out into equal parts, into about 40 different envelopes, everyone's vitamins. And so as a result, we managed to stay healthy in an affordable way. So bit of a strange introduction, I think, to community activism.
Nice.
But that's like kind of like a network, right? Because you're like helping each other also, but like doing something that's good for all of us, but all of you guys, but in some way you are like just getting the advantage of doing it together versus just doing it by yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In other words, it's better that everyone and actually, even from a selfish point of view, I couldn't have done it on my own either, because you needed to buy 10 different types of vitamins, and you couldn't buy them for £1 or $1 a month. So actually, by banding everyone together and combining our resources, we actually made everyone reach the target that we all had.
Nice.
That's awesome. And when did you decide to start helping others? Like not just that way. Like I don't know, like how you've been doing like this moral codes and human rights education as a side.
When did I start that? Or
yeah, like how did you start to get to that, basically?
Well, I have to confess that I'm a butler, a British butler, and I basically wrote the manual on how to be a butler. I don't know do you know what a butler is?
No, I don't know.
Okay, it's in Spanish, it would be mayordomo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Okay.
So one of the first things I did as a butler was to write up what the job description was and how to do it, the manual. And from that, I got into helping a lot of butlers understand how to do their job. And I then started to teach. And from that, I started going around the world teaching people how to be butlers. But in order to be a butler, you really have to understand things like the mind. You have to understand that you're part of a team, that everybody is a human. They all should be treated with dignity. And certainly when it comes to being a butler, dignity is one of the characteristics. You express dignity yourself, but you treat people with the same. So I realized that in order to teach people these things, I taught them moral codes, and I also taught them human rights. We showed the videos actually for a number of years, and that's how I got into it.
That's very cool.
Wow.
Unusual, I think.
So you're the co-founder of Defending Humanity. Yeah. This is a movement dedicated to preserving the human rights of people all over the world. So tell us about when and why you started this basically member finance volunteer organization.
Well, we founded Defending Humanity in June, and that was just this year. So we've only been going half a year. And it happened when I bumped into a friend at a convention out of state, which was approaching how do we maintain our personal freedoms, which you can also say would be our human rights. I've been observing the rapid decay of society, particularly after 9/11, and I've been looking for a workable solution for a number of years, and finally settled on human rights being the needed vehicle. It was the best way to protect our personal freedoms. And I mentioned this to Niels, the friend that I met, And he was on board straight away because he was also looking for a solution. And he liked my angle. And so Defending Humanity was born. Our focus really is on defending humanity by activating humanity to defend their human rights. In other words, we want humanity to defend its own rights because that is the only way it will happen.
Yes. Good.
Yeah.
And then it's mostly an educational approach, correct?
Well, actually, we have a four-phase strategy. The first one is absolutely educational, and so is the second. We are all volunteers, as you said. We're up to about over 200 members now. And what we're focused on is this four-phase strategy. The first one is to make as many people as aware as possible that they do have human rights, just like you've been saying. And the human rights we've referred to, of course, are the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Yeah.
So as such, of course, we're not reinventing the wheel, because there are organizations such as Youth for Human Rights, United for Human Rights, Peaceful Planet, Road to Rights, and others that have already put out excellent materials for letting people know their rights. So we haven't created new materials so much as we just refer to these and add supporting material on our own website. So that's the first phase. But then we ask people to actually do something with the knowledge that they now have. We ask them to, it's a very simple strategy because we know that people are busy and they can easily get overwhelmed if you give them too many things to do because they've already got so many things to do.
Right.
So we simply ask them to reach out to the people that they know and have them educate themselves on our website, which links to Youth for Human Rights videos on their rights as humans. And then we ask them to get these people to reach out to the people that they know. And it's actually an amazing statistic mathematically, that if you have 5 people reach out to 5 people each day, who then reach out to 5 more people each day, within 2 weeks, do you know how many people you would have reached, roughly?
How many?
2 billion.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And it's just a mathematical formula. It's something which anyone who's familiar with multi-level marketing, they know this sort of datum. It does require, of course, everybody to do it for 2 weeks.
Right.
At least at the beginning. The last guy in line on the 14th day only has to do it once, and you'd have reached to 2 billion. But anyway, that's not the idea. The idea is that we get as many people as possible, emailing, calling, texting, face-to-facing in ever large numbers to say, hey, it's half an hour work, or an hour's work, I should say. Get yourself trained on your human rights. You do have them, you know. So that's the main thing we ask people to do. But we also, as we grow and we have more people joining us, we ask them to support other human rights organizations in any way they can, such as United for Human Rights. And we've recently been working with Peaceful Planet and Global Pioneers to introduce human rights education to millions of students in about half a dozen or more, actually, about 8 countries at least, such as Sri Lanka. So that's phase 1, educate.
Yeah.
The second phase, do you have a question?
Yeah, perfect. No. I was going to ask you the second one, and then you started talking, so perfect.
Good. So the second phase is to then bring home to people that what they consider to be normal in society is often actually a violation of their human rights. They've become so used to things being the way that they are, and they've been gradually led to believe that it is normal, when it is in fact a great departure from the human rights our predecessors worked really so hard to identify and put down in an official document or statement, such as UDHR, Universal Declaration. So the common theme that's pushed today by human rights violators is that other people are bad for some imagined reason, and that they should be controlled and isolated for the greater good and safety of all. And this way, humankind is divided against itself by those who actually have no regard or real care for their fellow humans, and that's ironic. And that's the way our freedoms are taken away, including being imprisoned and killed at the worst end of it. And all usually, and this is what's also ironic, it's all usually done by our fellow humans who've fallen for the lies that other people are bad in some way. And this is all just a silly game.
Yeah. So very well put. That is definitely that strategy, an evil strategy that we've seen over and over, especially in the later times.
Yeah, exactly. And we're late to the game. Other people have been playing this game. We have another 2 stages after that, which I think are important, but I don't think we need to go over them now, because we're really talking about human rights. But a clue to the 3rd stage is given in George Orwell's book 1984. And he showed what life was like when human rights had been cancelled and forgotten in that book. It's a horrible book. But,
yeah.
A lot of people know it. But what he said was, the day people realize that if they are in large, unified numbers, they can demand anything from their government. And that is the day that the government is in big trouble. That is why they keep you divided. Now, when we say government, that's a huge generality. I'm not saying all governments are bad at all. They need to be supported. But what you find is over time that governments are influenced by people who don't really have the best interests of everybody in mind. And that's where things go south.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. So if I'm understanding, I mean, from what we're saying, like what we're talking about, defending humanity is like a movement, right? Like a group of volunteers that you got together all over the world, doesn't matter where they are, and they are what is it? So anybody can be part of that volunteer group. Like, what is the background of these volunteers? Do they need to be lawyers, or is just anybody in the community that just wants to spread the word?
Anyone who is a human is very welcome to defend our rights.
You have a very tough qualifier, by the way.
What's that?
You have a very tough qualifier. Like you're very limiting.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because there's an awful lot of humans on this planet.
Yeah.
But there are a few what I call, there's humankind and there's human not so kind.
That's a good point.
And I don't think they qualify as humans yet. We need to sort out their lives so that they start to look a bit better on other people.
But you know why I ask you that also, Stephen? Because sometimes people think, right, because human rights is like a universal declaration and it's like, articles that kind of feels like it's law. A lot of people think that you have to have like a legal or lawyer profession just to talk about them, right? So I just want to make sure that everybody's understanding that the human rights is not just about, obviously lawyers can defend with the tools of laws, right? But the human rights is not just for them or just for them to talk about them, right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, they're very important to the overall picture. But honestly, the whole point about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is that it's been presented to us as a public document. And the whole point of United for Human Rights, Youth for Human Rights, and similar organizations, although I very much favor the videos that are put out by these organizations, because they make it so clear what human rights are, so anyone can promote them.
Yeah.
So absolutely, everyone should be. I mean, that's the only thing that will really guarantee human rights, is the fact that everybody knows them. So that we don't want lawyers arguing it in some court and then nothing much happens, or some law changes, and then we're all still sitting around with human rights being violated left, right, and center.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely.
So the way that you're actually preserving this or achieving this purpose that you want to preserve human rights is through, like, we could call it like mouth to mouth, right? Like everybody's just communicating about human rights. Just tell your friends of them and educate yourself and your friends, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's our strategy. We're really what you call a grassroots And I think a lot of human rights organizations are. It's like you speak to people you know, and then people you don't know, and more people know.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense. Good. So as you probably know, we have this shows or webinars are basically featuring different basically non-profit organizations and how they themselves tackle some human rights out there in the society. Some of them help certain groups, etc. Obviously, your organization is more inclusive, so you're dealing with education and proactively helping pretty much everybody with all of the human rights, right? So why do you decide to use human rights to fix the problems? Obviously, you mentioned earlier, you have seen degradation of society throughout all this time, especially, in the terms of human rights. So why do you decide to use human rights to fix the problems you have observed?
Right. That's a very good question, actually. I think, first of all, let's look at why do we have human rights? And the question is it because humankind is basically kind? And I would say no. That's not why we have human rights. We have them because there are a few humans amongst us who are not so kind, as I mentioned earlier. And they're trying to push us all in the direction, they always have for thousands of years, in the direction of control and super control of their fellow humans. They basically create totalitarian regimes where no freedoms exist. And usually, I'm afraid to say, with the idea that other humans are of no value and are therefore expendable. That is the point of view it takes to violate the rights of other individuals and worsen their lives. Because you and I, and the people listening, we wouldn't, we don't take pleasure in making someone's life miserable.
Right.
But some people obviously do. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these human rights having to be stated. And while we don't normally focus on this reality when talking about human rights, it is always there in the background. The question of how human rights are violated and by whom, and why we have to fight for human rights when we are meant to be civilized people in a modern age. The fact is, we are civilized, but a few of these human not-so-kinds, as I call them, have different ideas that rarely include the welfare of others. So we can be stronger than them, but it takes recognizing the ideas and mindset that they have, which then influence their attitude toward their fellow humans and thus steers the actions they take against them. The fact is, they hide their true feelings behind what seems like positive programs, but that does not make their real thoughts any less harmful, really. So their actions don't work for humankind, not even the human not-so-kinders, because if you squash the life and vitality out of individuals, there's nobody left who's interested and able to make society run well. And the irony is that the human not-so-kinds do not have enough life in them to realize what a society of robots and slaves will mean for them in the end. So in actual fact, what they're doing, nobody wins with. So, I've been looking at this. There's like 300 civilizations, really, that have come and gone because of what these people do. And we've all suffered under the yoke of these people, and they feel superior, and they have no respect for the rights of others, etc., etc., etc. It's not normal for this state of affairs to exist, and we can do something about it. So why did I decide on human rights? Because it's the way to push back against this horrible movie script that humankind seems to be sleepwalking through under the direction of these people. For I guess 2,500 years at least, humankind has been pushing back against totalitarian people who want to super control and who don't feel well towards their fellows. They've been pushing back by creating human rights, more and more comprehensive, more and more sophisticated, until we have what we have today. And so that is the tool that we have to push back against totalitarian regimes. And that's really what we're talking about. That's where human rights, when I say totalitarian, it's also any regime or any country or empire that thinks other people are less important and that they can be taken advantage of. And I have to confess, I was brought up in one of the best schools in England, and it actually supplied the personnel way before my time for running the British Empire. And even after the British Empire had crumbled and disappeared, I went through that school for 4 years. And when I came out at the other end, I had the viewpoint that I was superior to everybody else. And it took me 20 years to lose that point of view. And when I would go to a foreign country, I'd think everyone else was the foreigner. Do you get that? And that shows how arrogant I was. And I didn't agree with any of that. I actually rebelled against the school and I got kicked out for my pains. Not something I'm particularly proud of, but it shows that I didn't really agree with that point of view, but I still had it.
Right.
And so that's the mindset that goes on. And you can't have human rights being practiced when some people have the point of view that other people don't deserve to be treated with dignity and respect and liked.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the main reason. But the second reason was that I saw that there were thousands of groups around the world working on making the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that they speak with 10,000 or 1,000 or however many there are separate voices. They're too focused on their own agenda to realize that it will take them speaking with one loud voice to put an end to the activities of the human not-so-kinders. So what is the one cause that can bring these groups together? Human rights, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Human rights actually form the foundation upon which all other socially inclined causes are based. If human rights and their rights of all humans are not respected, no constructive action will ever succeed against powerful groups that want only destruction for the very best of reasons. So I know we're on the right track in selecting human rights because when we started defending humanity, very few people framed the ongoing shutdown of society in terms of human rights. Maybe one or two groups did. Very few mentions of human rights. But today, we hear human rights being referred to repeatedly by those organizations who are concerned about where society is going. I'm not saying at all that we influence them to do that, but we are certainly riding and supporting that wave of awareness among activists around the world. And the simple truth is that it is a truth that cannot be escaped. If we are to create the kind of civilization that the majority of humankind wants, it will be on the foundation of human rights known and insisted upon. Nothing else can unite us as the brothers and sisters we ultimately are, actually, or build the needed foundation for a real civilization. And that's the way it seems to me.
Wow, that's like very nice said, Stephen.
Very well said.
Yeah, you totally brought the point that you're a writer, so you definitely speak what you write. So as you said, I mean, you mentioned a lot about, certain groups, like that can, that's why human rights were born, right? Because there were certain groups that thought they had more rights than others because they kind of had the power, right?
Yeah.
In a certain position, having power to do something, being in government, it gives you certain responsibility to do so also, right? So a lot of people think that, like politicians, government have to solve all our problems that we see in the society, right? Because it's like, it's their job. And literally, it's their job, right? Which is true. But that doesn't mean that we as citizens, as you mentioned, of the world, as citizens of part of this planet, can't do anything about it. So how can you relate this? We showed the video, Human Rights 29, responsibility, that we put at the beginning of this webinar. So what would you say is the part that each citizen has to do with human rights? I think you mentioned it, not like all over what you mentioned, but like in summary, why would a citizen why would they have to do or educate on human rights related to their responsibility, right? Versus giving that responsibility to the government?
Well, actually, it's for their own health. I mean, if you expect the government to do everything for you, it probably won't happen. But two, if you get up and do something, you will feel a heck of a lot better, and things will start moving in the right direction. But there is something else that is worth looking at here. I've done a lot of writing about artificial intelligence and so forth. And one thing that concerns me is that if we want human rights to be respected and known, then we have to have humans do that. Right now, we've got a strong movement for cyborgs, and a cyborg is a half human, half robot, and robots being made increasingly sophisticated with artificial intelligence. And the powers that be keep pushing humans down in terms of importance, value, and effectiveness. Unfortunately, some of the powers. And I suspect that cyborgs and robots will then be given cyborg rights. They may even be considered senior to citizens, human citizens. Whatever the future holds, though, will keep moving in this anti-human direction unless humankind stands up and insists on its human rights before being completely swamped by this whole anti-human agenda. So that's why everybody has lots of things to do. They've all got different hats or duties in different areas. But one of their duties has to be, if they really want to continue as a human, they really have, and a human living in a society which is a pleasure to be in, they really have to say, okay, this is my battle too. There are 8 billion people in this world, and if even 2 billion stand up and say no, then nobody can say no to us saying no.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's definitely battling the whole agenda of dividing and conquering, right? So this is kind of like uniting and conquering against that horrible narrative.
Yes, and I don't know who called United for Human Rights, who gave it that name, but it was very prescient. It was very advanced thinking. It was totally spot on.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. You mentioned something very important, and we always bring it up in all the webinars, which is the topic of help. Based on what you're saying, we agree with you 100% on how therapeutic help can be, not just for the one that receives it, but for the one that gives it. For that reason, we always ask the question, or we always ask the guest to tell us a story of offering help or giving help to somebody and how that affected you positively.
Aha. All right. Well, I can tell you a story about some counseling I did in the middle of nowhere in the dead of winter in southern Russia by the Ural Mountains. I was staying at a country estate. There was like 4 feet of snow everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere, and you certainly couldn't go to a restaurant nearby, mainly because there weren't any, but you couldn't really drive through 4 feet of snow. So unfortunately, the cook who is at this estate was an older lady, and she took absolutely no delight in feeding anyone in the property. And I say that based on the food that she presented and her sullen face. You know, she was very not happy. And nor were we, factually. So I was meant to be there a whole month, I beg your pardon. And of course, the staff and the employer, they were there the whole time. So I felt it would be in everyone's interest if I did something about this. And I gave her some nice recipe books, and she put them on a shelf and never looked at them. So after a couple more days of more cabbage soup and who knows what else, I asked her what was happening. It's easy to reject someone, you know, who's dedicated in their misery, but it always pays to find out what their side of the story is. And in this particular case, it was a bit of a tragedy. She had been like this for a year, apparently. And ever since, it was basically, she found her husband hanging from the rafters of their garage. Not a very nice topic.
Wow.
Yeah. And so this loss weighed heavily on her. And she had kept herself alive physically, obviously, but inside she was pretty much dead. So this is something I knew that I could fix because I'm a Dianetics counselor. And according to Human Rights number 27, I think it is, Everyone has the right to share in the benefits of scientific advances. So I used one of my students to provide instant translations. My level of Russian was the usual 2 words, "Нет" and "da," meaning no and yes. So
Wow.
that obviously wouldn't go very far. So anyway, using this translator, I asked the cook if she wanted to do something to lighten her burden. Her answer was "da," or yes. I gave a 2-minute instruction to my student, my butler student, on what to say and do. And I asked the cook through her to lie on a couch and close her eyes. And for the next several hours, I was using the original techniques of Dianetics developed in 1950, not the streamlined modern version, which is way, way faster. We had her recall everything about the time she found her husband. And then an earlier time when her husband had found his father hanging by the neck, and her husband had told her that that was the way he would die too.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, as you can imagine, this is a threat, really, but it hadn't actually happened yet. But of course, it didn't float her boat. She was not happy. Anyway, by midnight, the counseling was over. We all went back to our rooms. And when the cook returned the next morning, she was full of energy. She looked quite pretty, actually, in her new makeup. And she replaced her grey clothes with bright red and blue colors. You know, she looked actually quite rather nice. She went straight for the cookbooks to plan lunch. And she announced as she was walking over, "I'm going to find myself a new husband." So
Oh my God.
I thought that was pretty good for a senior citizen.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, well, why not? My thought is, where there is hope, there's life. And where there is life, there is hope. And that is exactly what we're doing here with humankind. And, you know, you could say we're going through dark hours. Because the fact is the resilience of life in the face of adversity should never be underestimated. And the key is keeping hope alive so life can turn its tremendous energies to rebuilding instead of worrying about what we have been led to believe will come, or thinking about what has been or will be, or that the human not so kinders are too powerful or anything like that. The point is we can roll this back. We can win.
I love it. It's a great story.
well
I love
done.
that story. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
And so kind of like to finish up our amazing interview, and thank you so much for being here. We want you to tell us about your future projects for this Defending Humanity movement. What are you guys working on, like short term, or maybe like a special project that you're working on?
Okay, well, I think we could sum that up as 3 main actions apart from what we're already doing. First of all, we're starting to reach out to religious leaders at a local level because religion is under attack. It's the same basic pattern: divide the religions by promoting extremist elements. And then to add insult to injury during recent lockdowns, drug places, alcohol places, and casino places were allowed to stay open, but churches were closed. These actions actually violate human rights 18 through 20. And so we want to connect religious leaders with the human rights they're entitled to before they, whether we're talking about the rights, the leaders, or possibly even their whole religion, are disappeared. The fact is that totalitarian regimes don't appreciate people realizing and practicing their religion and realizing they're spiritual beings. So they're often a first target. In fact, actually, at Human Rights, the Youth for Human Rights 20th anniversary event earlier today, it was Rabbi Michael Shevak, I think his name was. He had the same basic message. Religions have got to reassert human rights before our spiritual rights are blocked by the materialistic forces of science and totalitarianism. So I'm not quoting him, I'm just sort of paraphrasing.
Yeah.
So that's the first one, is helping religious leaders locally to connect with their human rights and pass them on to their own congregations. The second is we're actually launching another group called Joining Forces. And that's designed to communicate the same basic message of defending our human rights to those who are already engaged in battling in their own sectors. we have found that many of those in the Western countries who until now have not been aware of human rights violations in the rest of the world have been shocked at their human rights being taken away from them over the last year and a half. And so that is where their attention is. And we have to match that focus on the human rights violations they're experiencing for them to come on board with the human rights message and get them spreading out to their members. We've got to come together under the banner of human rights. And then lastly, and we've only just launched this, we haven't done much about it at all yet. We're setting up the Global Human Rights Alliance. And it's the same purpose, but what we're targeting is small human rights organizations. Right now, they speak usually with one loud voice. What we want to do is give them a portal or a platform for human rights organizations to share resources, ideas, and to work together so as to magnify their efforts as individual organizations. I mean, we already see this happening with Youth for Human Rights and United for Human Rights. And we want to help support that by creating a website that they can use and go together in order to coordinate with each other on their own programs. We're going to kickstart that with an online music fest of human rights artists of all types, not just music, but artists, poets, and so on. And we want to raise funds that we can then flow to and finance these smaller human rights organizations that need funds or need much more funds in order to do a lot more work than they're able to do with their existing funds. It's amazing what they do with existing funds, but we want to support them in that. And so those are the three main projects we have still going, or we'll be having in the future.
Wow, that definitely sounds amazing. Yeah.
Good. And then when you say we, so are you leading this? Did you have a group, or how does that work in terms of leadership?
Well, I'm basically the founder. I'm the co-founder of Defending Humanity, but I founded Joining Forces because I recognize that with Defending Humanity, we have to be completely neutral. We can't take any political positions. And we can't even talk about vaccines because vaccines themselves are divisive. Some people say yes, some people say no. And the fact is that vaccines are a medical matter, a private medical matter. They're not a political football, and we shouldn't be arguing about them. What we need to do is to bring people together. So we have to have a stand which is completely neutral. And also, factually, we have to have a stand which considers all 30 human rights. Maybe we're not that familiar with slavery here in America, even though there's many people who are in slavery in America, but most people aren't that familiar with it. They think, oh, that's something to do with Africa or something.
Yeah.
Or we used to have slaves here, but we don't anymore. It's like,
yeah.
So, right. and if you keep talking about the whole pandemic and all this sort of stuff, you may be talking to the groups that are fighting them, but you're not talking to the rest of the world. So we have to have Defending Humanity is the group that deals with human rights neutrally, all 30 human rights. Joining Forces speaks specifically to the lockdowns and the mandate, because that is what their attention is on, and we have to talk to them in the terms that are real to them. So that's why we've created, or that's why I founded this other organization, and the website should be online fairly soon for Joining Forces. But of course, Defending Humanity, it's been up for a few months already.
Wow.
That is awesome.
Very well.
So to anyone watching right now, that they want to help or contribute or become a little volunteer or etc. So they just want to be part of your life, right?
The movement of Defending Humanity.
Yeah, the whole movement and so on. So how can they reach you? How can they contact you, etc.?
Okay, well, the best thing to do is to go to defendinghumanity.global, not .com, not .info, nothing like that. Global. Defendinghumanity.global. Take a look at the site. If you're not already familiar, and I'm sure people on this program are familiar with their human rights, but if not, check out all the Youth for Human Rights videos. Make sure you understand what we're about, and then just go to the Contact Us page and send us an email. And either I or my wife, Monica, will see your email, and respond personally to your communications. It's not going to some anonymous website person or something. And we very much would love to have you, even if it's just 5 minutes a week, 5 minutes a day, half an hour a day, 40 hours a week. We don't care what. Just we're happy to have any help. And we'll give you very clear guidance as to what to do. It's very easy.
Awesome. Okay, Stephen, it's a pleasure to have you here. And I just want to wrap up with a few words. I think you hit it right when you said there's obviously something going on. There's a degradation of the culture, has been suffering a degradation, and there's always a responsible behind it, right? There's just like there's a positive movement, there's a movement behind all this. And I think you have the right path. I love the fact that you're focusing on education, on unification, and communicating the concepts that are going to bring this society to a much better state just by waking them up. Really, it's sort of like a wake up movement. Really, that's what it is. It's like educate and then unite and then do something about it. So I think and really the concept that I like the most is the globalization of this thing through all these projects you have going on, the platform, getting all those communication lines all together. So I thank you for what you do. I think we share more than we think. And I'm sure that we will be doing some more things together, just for the fact that we have our hearts and soul in the same spot.
Absolutely. And for me, it's an honor to be considered as part of the team, because you're the guys who've actually been in there pitching for a long time. So thank you for that.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It has been a pleasure to hear you, what you're doing, and your future projects. Definitely exciting to see all that coming through. And I mean, as long as humanity and the human beings, prosper in whatever situation it's going on, it's always great to just have people pushing for that, right? So thank you so much for doing that.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for giving us a voice, Sandra, Wency, and thanks for your time. And
absolutely.
All your listeners.
Yes, absolutely. And then we'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, great. So we're going to be wrapping up. So we'll bring the presentation up again. So wrapping up with the concept of human rights number 29, which is responsibility. Minimally, I think, there's a lot going on, and anybody who wants to participate, that is your human right there, taking responsibility and sharing this information, joining the different groups, and doing whatever you can or we can to contribute to the motion, right, Sandra?
And protect the human rights of others. That's like why this 29 is there, because we can't have just one human rights. They were meant to be all 30 together, and this is our human rights, meaning 29, meaning that this is our part of protecting the human rights. So definitely something important. That's why we always keep this in all our presentations.
That's right. Absolutely. All right. So thank you very much for being here. And as always, a candle loses nothing for lighting another candle. So as I said, share the love. If you feel like, if you know of have a group, or you need help with the topic of human rights, let us know. And then we do seminars, webinars, and workshops for small and large groups. So you can let us know, and then we'll help you either by doing the workshop ourselves or teaching you how to do it. So who how do they contact us, Sandra? What would be the best way?
Social media, Human Rights Tampa, Instagram or Facebook, it's totally fine. We are definitely there answering any comments, questions that they have. And just a reminder also that we have this week, at, specifically the 10th of December, Friday, this Friday, is the International Day for Human Rights. So we are having our event in Tampa. So if you want to participate, you can definitely go to our Facebook page and check out our event there to register. We would love to see you. It's an in-person event. So it's not virtual. We're people too. So we definitely invite you to be there so we can see each other and just celebrate. This is actually the 20th anniversary of Youth for Human Rights. So we are doing a special event that day also. So yeah, I think that's, I mean, having Steve today was perfect because he's all about human rights. And I think this is the week for human rights. So
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good. So I think we are done. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thank you guys. Bye bye.